Hello everyone, Sandra here with more Let's Make a Game with Astral Collision. That's the game I'm working on. I've done a couple of things between sessions. The big one was, I suppose, adding this dev room. I've also added a little bit more, I don't know why that did a right click there. I've added a little bit more hookups for the subway system. Nothing glamorous or interesting. The dev room here, the purpose is to set stuff up with treasure chests because I want to have consistent visual styling or schemes. That way when you open a chest, you know what it's containing. You can actually see over here in the lower right corner the name of the event. So I'm probably going to name these for the types of chests they are. I haven't quite figured that out yet, although I think this might be for food because it's a fairly simple thing. Part of it is I need to figure out what things need to go in chests. So, I wish I had a good way of putting notes just directly into the thing here. But I guess I can go... Yeah, you have a note section. So I'm going to need chest contents. So if you ever enter this room, it's going to display the name, "Hi, how did you get here?" So chest contents, so I need food, crafting materials, weapons, gear, money, quest items. Do I want like a generic quest item or do I want a key item? I think I might just go with key item. Then I basically have two more ones, right? Because I have 8 chests, sprites. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So anyway, I'll figure out what some of those are as time goes on. We also have these sci-fi chest equivalents. Those things like, here's a safe, cardboard box, a couple of these storage boxes. Got some like that next to me, actually, with Legos in them, with not enough space to use them, which is disappointing. This, and then a briefcase. This is a briefcase. So if you look at the image here, you can see it's a briefcase opening. Whoop. Right here, briefcase opening. I'm not sure. What I'm thinking I might do with these is to say, okay, these are equivalents, and I think that's probably what I'm going to do. So like red chest matches up with red box. So like different areas might have their sci-fi equivalent. So I'm thinking like cardboard box matches up really well with this. Kinda. Honestly, this here looks a lot like that. So in terms of like, if this contains food, then this is kind of like a lunchbox. That's my thought. These both look heavy duty. And then I'm thinking these will be like money. So briefcase full of money. So let's see. Money. I'm just going to name these both money. You. Food. It's not the main thing I want to do today, but while I'm thinking about some of this, I figure I might as well get it done. I like these right here, these guys, all being equipment, because they are very similar visually. I think I'm going to put crafting materials in this guy. Crafting materials, and you will also be called crafting materials. So that way I can click on it and see what it is. And I don't know about you, but this screams key items to me. So I'm going to put key items in safes. So these will be things like quests or basically anything that gets the key item designation can appear in these. These are probably going to be very rare. So I just need to figure out how I'm going to allocate stuff amongst these different colors. So if I go back to this, I have figured out food, crafting materials, money, and key items. So weapons and gear. Gear could be separated into different groups if I wanted to. So if I look at my types, we have weapon and offhand, and then head, body, hands, feet, and accessories. So I can make armor, offhand, and accessory. And separate gear out into. Whoop, that's not the. Over here. So instead of having gear, I can have offhand, armor, and accessory. So if I'm doing that as my scheme, which I think makes, I don't know, it makes as much sense as anything else. The main point is just to get stuff filled up. I could do that. I think what I'm going to do, actually, is I'm going to separate out weapons and offhands, and then I'm going to have gear as armor, accessories, etc. As one thing. And then I think I'm going to have consumables. I think so. Yeah. I think I like that. So let's put weapons in red. Weapons. Let's put offhands in offhand in yellow. So this will primarily be shields and, like, I think focuses and stuff. And then let's put armor and accessories. Let's just make this a little quicker. Copy and paste that. And then let's put consumables in blue. I think I like doing that. So, like, things like potions and stuff will go in blue chests. That, to me, feels more recovery, and that's what a lot of consumables will be. Okay, so I figured out my chest arrangement, which I like. And it feels pretty good to me. I like having... It's one of those things where the player may or may not notice, but if they do notice, I like having that consistency. It's like in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, when you go into an area and you see a chest, there's the blue chests that refill themselves there and usually have, like, crafting materials. There's the sort of gray chests that are just, like, one-use chests, and then there's I mean, they look kind of like this, right? They're like red and gold chests that have large amounts of money in them. So having different schemes like that can allow the player to anticipate the treasure, anticipate what loot they're getting. But it can also be something where it can, like, set expectations where you see, oh, okay, it's a simple thing. Hey, there's some food ingredients in here. Maybe I want some of those. Or, oh, that's an important item I need to pick up. You know, when seeing one of these chests, it's like, okay, there's a key item. I know that I want to go get that. Or, oh, I can expect money out of this. Having those expectations, if players pick up on it, can be something that can kind of build anticipation or help direct things. So I wanted to figure some of that stuff out. I'll probably put other stuff in there, but right now, my main desire to accomplish today is to figure out what I'm doing with this spreadsheet. I don't need conditional formatting rules up right now. Okay, so let's go over what I'm wanting to do. Because one of the things that I've been thinking about some is how I want to handle equipment. And so let me kind of talk a little bit about this. So traditionally in an RPG, equipment will come in flavors of increasing strength. So, like, let's say I am playing like a Tales of Symphonia or something like that. Just a standard RPG. You're going to start off with, like, your bronze sword, or like Dragon Quest builders, right? You'll start off with, like, your oaken club, or your cypress stick, your oaken club, and then, like, your stone sword, copper sword, iron sword, steel sword, super magical sword, sword of kings and stuff like. But they're all basically like, this is the same weapon, just more power, or, you know, maybe there's some additional properties like, oh, this one deals fire, but it's usually increasing strength. And that, like, you can see over here, I have, what is this? A ludicrous 28 types. 28 weapon types, making, like, progressively stronger versions just seems like, A, a lot of stuff, and B, kind of uninteresting. I don't want to fill up my game with a bunch of what is effectively worthless gear. The other thing is senses of progression. How do I want progression to work? And so I think about how do I want to handle these things? How do I want to balance the game? How do I want to set all this stuff up? So I was thinking some of like, okay, what I think I actually want is I want the baseline gear that you can start the game off with to actually be perfectly fine. I don't want to set up increasing strength of gear where you get that bronze sword, iron sword, steel sword, etc., and kind of work your way up to stronger and stronger equipment. And so the reason why I don't want to do that is, A, I don't think it's very interesting. Yes, you get stronger equipment, but just because the equipment's stronger, like, that's kind of exciting, but it means that, A, I have to make sure you're finding that stronger equipment and somehow acquiring it. B, it can invalidate whole swaths of crafting. So there's a lot of work in setting up a bunch of stuff that can kind of end up not paying off. Like, I was thinking, on this note, it's kind of like the Guild Wars 2 crafting system where you have all of the... For the people who haven't played it, it's basically you have all of these tiers that you have to go up in stuff that you can make in order to make things appropriate to your level that you're really, like, this is actually worth using. Because otherwise you're just making a bunch of stuff for lower levels that's just not... You're not going to want to use a sword for level 40 at level 80. It's just not going to be good enough. So I like the Guild Wars 1 model, where you basically reach max stats very quickly, where you get, your sword of 15 to 22 damage, because that's sort of the damage ranges in that game. And you can get that very early on, relatively speaking, or you can, depending upon the game. But getting max level gear is not the challenge. The challenge is getting the customization that you want, or getting the skins that you want generally. And I like that direction a bit more for a variety of reasons. And so what I want to accomplish with the system is I want to have what I would describe as sort of parallels or horizontal progression. So rather than getting gear that's straight up more damaging, I want it so that way new gear you get opens up different possibilities. It functions differently. So I was kind of brainstorming some possible variants up here. So things like different than normal damage types, as an example. So let's say normally a sword deals slashing damage. Maybe you get a sword that deals fire damage, right? And I want to also, or another thing that I can do is have a special skill attached to a weapon. So like, let's say you get a sword that has a thrust attack on it. It gives you an attack skill that's like a sword thrust that deals piercing damage instead of slashing on that attack, or maybe has some other properties that might be useful. And then I can also have other unique properties like increasing stats or counter rates or something. What I'm thinking I want to do is if a weapon like a sword is dealing specifically like fire damage, I want it to increase your fire stat, but I don't want it to scale its attack power on your fire stat. So I've kind of been thinking some about how I want to set all this stuff up for possible variants. But the other big thing that I want to do is I don't want to leave everything at sort of the initial values I'd given it. I basically recorded all of the different properties of some of the weapons that or the initial batch of weapons I'd made. So if I go back into the RPG Maker project and go to weapons, you can see that I made a bunch of weapons. So like we have a steel dagger and a steel sword. And you can see, okay, this deals 60 to 80 slashing damage, has a critical multiplier of 1.8, attack speed of 10, counter attack plus 5%, and deals slashing damage, right? You can see right here, plus 1 attack time. So all of these properties that you can see on these weapons, I can go to different weapons. Like the military rifle is especially powerful against rats because they're weak to piercing, and it does a lot of piercing damage. It does like average of, what is that? 45, so 135 piercing damage. Except it gives plus hit rates, that increases the damage a little bit. But you get the idea of like, okay, this weapon hits really hard. But anyway, what I want to do is kind of think about how do I want to set up all of these weapons to kind of scale as you increase in levels. And so I have a couple of different, actually I should add level as a stat here. It wasn't one of the ones I was initially using, but it totally is a stat. So these colors here to just color code stuff to see what things I'd initially set up to scale with things. So as a really interesting example, if I bump strength up to, say, 50, you'll notice claw is now highlighted, because claws uses the min value is the lowest between strength and dex, and the high value is the greatest. So there's some interesting ones where there's some properties like that. Some already just scale, like the whip just is values plus your dexterity and stuff like that. But what I want to do is I want to go through and say, okay, how are all of these going to scale with something? Whether that's your max HP or your MP. Like, the energy sword is really interesting because it scales on the low end from your MP. So, like, if you're down to 10 MP, its low value is going to be really low, but its high value is always based on your maximum MP. So that makes it a weapon that kind of scales with that, which is really interesting and a really interesting property. But I want to kind of go through and figure out how am I going to set all of these up so that way they scale with stats. And then that's kind of a lock. That weapon type, that is how it works. Right? That is what it does. It scales itself off of these. Now, I can technically add other stats as well. I can add hit rate. I can add target rate, presumably, to these. Evasion, magic evasion, counterattack. Like, all of these stats are stats that I can also potentially work off of. This would actually be a great moment to go and grab where is advanced states? So these are the standard parameters, which I've already recorded. Attack, defense, strength, dexterity, fire, earth, air, and water. But there's also all of these right here that I can theoretically work with. So let's go into here and let's see. I'm just going to delete those out and just paste these in. And then, yeah, so there's those. The hit rate, evasion, counterattack rate. Can I... Hang on. Yes, over here, if I go to object, actually, no, it's probably easier to find it in AC modifications. I have it down here where I've copied and pasted all of the traits. So yeah, I can also get, like, all of these other things too. Like, I can get your guard rate, your evasion rate, all of these are already recorded there. But then I can grab target rate, guard rate, recovery rate, pharmacology. Again, I'm not necessarily going to make use of these, but I can. See, the easiest way of doing this is just copy and paste this and then clean it up. Okay, so yes, I want your target rate. I don't need this line. Let's clean these up. I guess I can fast forward this. Okay, there we go. So I have now kind of set this up. A lot of these are going to be things like 1. So evasion is probably 0. Crit rate is probably default like 0. So actually, if I kind of go through, a lot of these are probably going to default to like 0. And these are probably going to default to like 1. Just kind of assume all that. A lot of these are not going to be useful. Like experience rate is probably something I'm going to leave just constant, so that's probably not going to change. Floor damage rate can change though. Floor damage rate is basically like how much damage you take from things like lava or other such things. So usually you want this to go down. This is one of those things where I kind of wish there's a little bit more flexibility inherent in the system, and you can like add that flexibility in, but it's kind of a pain because menu items and all that sort of stuff is awkward. But anyway, I wanted to go ahead and record all of these. Guard effect rate is probably kind of interesting-ish, just because this would mean that the effectiveness would go up with wielding a shield. I also, for what it's worth, will do another set with other types of gear. I just recorded all of the weapons first. But what I think I want to do is kind of go through and figure out what the philosophy of each weapon will be. So I have a couple of important considerations. So most things, I think, will be strength or dex based. Most of these weapons will be strength or dex based. But I think some, like some of these guns, the flintlock, so like a crossbow, a flintlock, like this is an evolution, right? Crossbow to flintlock to wherever, yeah, shotgun and rifle. These are all kind of like the same basic concept of let's remove some of the human factor and let's make these dependent not so much on human skill or human capabilities in terms of strength, I should say. Although crossbows may require strength on the reloading, the effectiveness of the projectile does not depend upon human strength. So let's take some of these and let's set them up with, or they would all be more flat in terms of general scaling power. So a bunch of them are kind of, quite frankly, quite powerful. The flintlock is an interesting case in that its strength is in its critical multiplier, not in its raw damage. So it has a slightly higher crit rate, and its critical hits hit very, very hard. So I think for these guys, it makes sense to scale them on more like level or something like that. We're saying, yeah, okay, your level goes up, and then these become more effective. Okay, so I feel like something like a dagger is going to be probably just exclusively dex, or perhaps very, very minor. So this conceptually is very similar to what like the Souls games do, where their weapons scale with different stats. And so you can think of this as being very comparable to that. Now, they have plus versions where you can get like a dagger plus 1 or whatever. But think of this, what I'm looking to do is being very similar to if Dark Souls 3, if weapons just automatically came at plus 10. Where, I mean, that's not quite accurate. But imagine like a Dark Souls 3 where your weapons, instead of being able to upgrade them with Titanite, you can infuse them, and then otherwise they have very strong scaling off of your stats, where your dagger scales very poorly perhaps with strength, but very, very, very well with dexterity, to where it gets to be kind of effectively like a plus 10 equivalent strength with high enough dexterity. So that's kind of what I'm looking to do here. Is I'm specifically looking to kind of do that, because that means that you can have a huge variety of weapons that can all, rather than having to get like long sword and then iron long sword and, you know, different versions that are more powerful. I mean, obviously they have Titanite to kind of eliminate some of that as well. But anyway, that's kind of the direction that I'm thinking of going. So what I want to do is I want to make this, let's just do, how do I want to do this? I can insert note, but maybe I'll just insert notes. Strong with dexterity, very weak with strength. Okay, I don't know why that's lagging, but it is. Okay. That is... How do I spell string instead of strength? That's a good question. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm thinking here. I'm thinking the sword is probably going to have... what I'm thinking with sword is that I want low strength to count for a lot. And so... low strength... Basically, what I want to make sure I'm doing is that no particular weapon is clearly the best weapon, and that each have different properties to commend them. So, for example, right now, the sword is probably going to be fairly reliable on damage, somewhat quick, and have the ability to counterattack. Maybe I want to tweak some of those properties, though, to make sure that it's useful. Now, as I've thought about this a little bit, what I think I'm largely going to want to do for standard, I guess, weapons like the sword, is I'm going to want to just set this to equal 0. Round, because it's not always going to be nice and clear, 0.75 times, what is that, C10. So in other words, whatever the max value is, this will always be 75% of it. I think that's probably going to be the cleanest way of handling this. Now, I'm not married to these ranges, if that makes sense. I'm perfectly happy for weapons to kind of get broader ranges that they're working from and working in. So, with all of that in mind, what are each of these weapons about? That's one of the things I need to determine. What is it that would draw you to that weapon? So the dagger, for example, it's fast. So we can see it's not the fastest weapon, but I think it's like the third fastest or something like that. The gloves are faster and the crossbow's faster. The flintlock is very slow. The shotgun is relatively quick and the rifle is relatively quick, but the dagger is extremely fast. So it's fast. It has a really good crit multiplier that is kind of making up for the low damage per hit, but it attacks twice, so it's also more likely to crit, just because there's more chances for that to happen. So, let's see. That's some of what's going on with the dagger. The sword has a little bit of a chance to counterattack, but otherwise it's just going to be kind of a solid weapon. Maybe not a standout weapon, but a solid weapon. Let's see. So, what I think I want to do for the sword is I want to do kind of a... I want to do a graph that's basically like a log meets an exponential at kind of at high point and low point. So let's set my low point at 20 and my high point at 200. So if I have 20 and 200, let's say I do like log with respect to a base. So I can do log base 2 to this value. This would be the low end. Oh, I need to think about this. Okay, this is one of those things that's going to be a little hard to demonstrate here. So I'm just going to work out on like a piece of paper what I want to do and then come back, because that's going to work best. And unfortunately, I don't have a great way of drawing on my monitor screen. But the basic gist of what I want is a logarithm has an arc kind of like that. Do I have... This would be tools. I don't think this has a great way to draw graphs, unfortunately. Like it, so it will do data charts and stuff, but drawing. But I don't know that it. Oh. Well, what does this let me do? Lets me do select a thingy. curve? Well, basically well, this is not working the way that I thought it would. Stop? Okay, double click to stop. Okay, I'm just figuring out how this thing works. I don't want this line. Can I just delete this line? Okay. So a logarithm is going to kind of curve off like that. And exponential is the inverse function. So it's going to kind of curve up like this. And what I basically want is I want this point down here to roughly be at like 20, where they are adding, say, this one is giving me a multiplier of like 1 or like 0.9, I think. I don't know. How do I want this to... Okay, so... Yeah, okay. So what I really want is I want to figure out what the y values are, because that's what's really important here. So one of these is going to be the multiplier for your strength stat, and the other is going to be the multiplier for your dex stat. And what's going to effectively happen is that... Okay, so this is not quite working. So I need to think through how I want this to behave. And what I want is... I want it so that way the benefit from your strength stat, the more strength you have, the less benefit it's giving to your... Okay. So, to finish my thought, basically the more strength you have, the less overall benefit it's giving. So, like, let's say if we're following this curve, maybe you have 20 strength here and it's giving you a return of like 21 strength. And by the time you're getting up here in the curve, let's say you have, 40 strength is giving you like 50 to your damage. And then let's say up here is like 100 strength, or like, I don't know, 60 strength is giving you 100, and then 90 is giving you 90, or 90 is giving you like 110, and then you're getting like, you have 200 strength, and it's giving you like maybe 120. That makes sense? Let's ignore this, whatever this is, and let's actually, because we have a spreadsheet. No. Delete. Here, this thing. Just delete this. Save and close, I guess. I don't really need that. Okay, so let's plot out some values, because I think this is what's going to be most useful, is I can plot out some values and then I can calculate what my graph should look like from that. So if I look at, let's just call this sword for the moment. And I center it and I bold it because that makes me happy. So, okay, let's actually move this over. Okay, let's just delete that. Let's merge these cells. Let's merge these cells, because I'm going to need, like, okay, so here is strength, damage, and then dexterity, damage. Let's italicize those and center them, and then sword, nice, bold, centered, good. I don't know. I'm gonna do this because I want to compress this. So I'm thinking. Okay, so let's. Whoa, no, get out of here. That's the picture. I don't need the picture. So let's run our strength through 20, 30. Okay, so that should allow us to get by 10s if I go down there. Okay, I don't need that much. I need it through there. And then I can copy this over to dexterity. And then because I prefer things centered, we're going to center those. And then because I think it's going to make it a little bit easier, I want to put these guys in separate boxes Some amount of this is, I admit, formatting pointlessness, but it makes me happy, so we're going to do it. Okay, so strength at 20. Let's say I want the damage bonus from 20 strength to be 20. What would be good here? So if that's giving out, so that's a 1-to-1 right now. So maybe this is giving, okay, let's pick a final value. Let's say I want 200 to return 100 for both. Okay. So if I get 100 from both, that means I'm going to end up adding 200 damage by the time we get to sort of those values. And then let's say I want dexterity to also start off at giving me 20. Let's just pick some starting points where this is like 1 and then that's okay. So I want this to be giving me, say, at the halfway point at 100. Let's say I want this to be giving me 90. So this then gives me a range here that I can curve up on. This gives me some points to work with. So if I don't have a good graph, but in this range, like this is obviously going to be like 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100. So let's just kind of do that. The point here is, so the final goal that I want to reach. Okay, so that gives me a very slow amount of curve. So basically what's happening is I want your strength to cap out very quickly in the amount of benefit it is giving you. And I want your dexterity to go very slowly to where this is kind of an inverse. So maybe this goes like 22, 24, 26, 29, 35. So this is now like 50% there. Let's see, that's plus 6. So let's do like 42, 50, and then say right about 100. Like let's say this jumps up to 60. Okay, this is also running into problems. So the problem here is I want this to be going kind of by leaps and bounds. So this is going a little too quickly. So if I do kind of a straight inverse of what that is, this would basically need to go 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Like that. And then this needs to start jumping up because you can see that like this overlaps 2 points there. And then this would need to start jumping up quite quickly to maybe where it jumps from like 29 to like 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, no. Then this would be like 90, 80, 70. And this is not going to be exact. I'm going to get... okay, so obviously this is not quite lining up as well as I would like. But let's say maybe 35. There's a little bit of a transition point. So then what I can do is I can take this and I can insert chart from that data. Okay, so this is obviously not a terribly useful chart because a column chart is not what I need. I need a line chart. And okay, now I need to figure out dexterity, damage. Now I don't want to compare these two. I want to... this is the part where I need to figure out how this thing works. I need to turn you into a graph. So the x-axis... Okay, so I need to... Okay, let's get your edit thing over here. The data range I need to change from that to that. And our x-axis is this. I think. Something like that. Yeah. Let's get you out of the way. So now I can look at this graph and I can see, okay, it's going to look something kind of like that. So these are maybe not perfect values, but it gives you the rough idea of I want it to look something like that. This needs to drop down, let's see, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30. So that's not quite right. So maybe there's like 26. Like basically, I don't know, let's just do roughly 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Okay, so then I have this one, and let's make another. Where is the chart? Right here. I was sitting over it, not paying attention. I want this with the... okay, let's move this over here. And the x-axis of this. Okay, so now I can look at these, and like again, this is not perfect, but you get the general gist of, okay, we start off, at our 2020 spot, and then we go up and then smooth out. And this starts off and starts slow and smooth and goes up. So this sort of graph is somewhat similar to a logarithm, and this is somewhat similar to an exponential. So if I wanted to calculate these, what I want initially is, let's take our key points, 20, 100, and 200. So this is our start. This is not technically our mid. Our mid is 110, I think. Because that should be 90 to there, and let's see, 110 minus 20 is 90 as well. So that's our middle point is that. So what I'm going to want is I'm going to want a log that takes in this value. So let's make it a base 2, and then put in that value. And I want that to be 1, I think. Or no, I want this... How do I want us to do this? If I have this 2 to that equals 20. Is that what this is? No, that's 20 to... Wait, how do their... Excuse me, I need to look at the help documentation for their logarithmic function, because I need to understand what order the parts come in. Log? No, I don't want to just insert the log function. I want to know how it works. Yes, question mark. Log value base. Okay, I need the... That's what I kind of suspected might be the case, because this was not... Okay, thank you. The value that I was getting made no sense, so I need this log this comma 2. That gets me a nice respectable 4, which is way more sense. It worked opposite of how I thought it did, is kind of what we're seeing here. So theoretically, what I want is if I take this times 5. Let's just see what I get if I do, or times, nope, 4.5. 4.7. Cool, close enough. Okay, so if I do that, what values do I get? Okay, clearly that's not going to work because that's 20 and then 32 and then 36. So those are obviously all way too low. All right. So let's think about how this function works. It should grow quickly and then slow down. So I think what I want is I want a bigger base. What happens if I give a base of 100? A base of 100 would be... now I'm trying to think through. It's actually going to be a lot easier if I calculate out... No, not... Sure, whatever. I mean, we can see what happens. That doesn't quite work the way I would want it. So, like, this is going to be easier if I kind of go the other direction. So, if I... Because the exponential is easier to calculate, kind of critically speaking. Okay, so if I have... I want this to return 20. So, I can take 20 to the first. That's going to be 20. And if I want 110, so I can make this, say, this value over 20. And let's just see what we get. Just so that way I can kind of calibrate my think. Okay. Okay. That's a very big number. It's not how we want to do this. So the question then is, do I want to... Where do I want my inputs to be? Because I can input dexterity into the function as part of the exponent or as part of the base. So if I want this to be something where... Or I can put it as a multiplier, but that doesn't give me enough stuff. One moment, I'm going to go grab my graphing calculator. Okay, I've grabbed my graphing calculator. Unfortunately, I do not have a webcam or any other way of actually putting it on screen. But what I generally want here is I'm going to want a way of... so standard 2 to the x is going to give me... very quickly, it's going to grow from 1 to, let's see. So at 0, for those who don't know an exponential curve, you can just like Google 2 to the x and it will draw one for you. But anyway, so at 0, it's going to give you a value of 1. At 1, it's going to give you a value of 2. 2, it's going to give you a value of 4. So, I mean, obviously because it's an exponential. So what I specifically want here is I want a value of 20 to give me 20, and then a value of 110 to give me roughly 30. So if I have my target set at like roughly 30 and then roughly 100 at 200. So like let's actually just calibrate for the ends right now. So I want 20 to give me 20, and then I want 200 to give me 100. So I can either, if I do a base 10, a base 10 would give me, and that's really easy to calibrate for the 100 because I just need to get squared. So at that point, I have the x value over 100. Which would give me a very slow exponential. But okay, let's zoom. I need to adjust my window. I wish I could show you this, but okay. At some point, I'm going to make a graphing program, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So I don't really care about a value there. Let's go. Actually, I care about say 20. So let's go 19 to 201. The min can be 19. Or no, let's just make the y min 0 and the y max 120. Okay, I'm just setting up my window so that way I can actually see. I know this is not exciting television. Okay, so that gives me a curve. So if I enter in 200, I get 100 as I expect. 20 gets me 1.5. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to flatten this out a little bit. The best way to flatten an exponential curve, or like the quickest, is to lower the base. So realistically, what I'm probably going to want is I'm going to want to lower the base some and then have an additive to it. So let's say I want to lower this base a little bit, say to 9. So if I lower that to 9, then when that's squared, that's 81, so I'll need to add 19 to it. And if I go to that graph, that's looking a little bit more reasonable. So at 200, I get 100. And at 20, I am getting approximately 20. At 110, I get 30. Okay, so I have a formula now. So this is going to be 9 to the... Well, okay, it's going to be round 9 to the yes over 100. What? Oh, I have one extra parenthesis. Okay. What have you done improperly? What have I done improperly? Oh, I forgot to add 19. Plus 19. Excuse me. Okay. So according to my calculations, 20, yeah, is just a little bit over. So instead of rounding, I can floor it. No, not. No, just get rid of that. If I floor it, I should get the exact same values here. So this right here gives me a formula then that I can use. So if I take this formula and I plug it in over here, I center it again because of course I do. Instead of P26, I want R6. And then give me my right thing back. And then I fill that out. Okay, where's my clear formatting? Because I don't like how this did its formatting. There it is. Clear formatting. Center this. Okay. So now I'm getting... Whoops. Sorry, I'm being completely distracted by completely random things, but it's important. So now I'm getting... wow, this grows very slowly. 20, 20, 21, 22, 22, 23... 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 36, 40, 46, 52, 60, 71, 84, and 100. But you can see what that did to the graph over here, because this graph is coming off of this, and you can see sort of the gentle curve. There's a little bit of bumpiness to it, and that bumpiness is the floor function, because it is very quickly removing some of the... or it's tweaking some of the values, so it makes it very uneven. But you can see, okay, this is looking roughly like how I want it to look. And that's giving me this curve, and what's happening now is they're going to meet. So if I'm applying this to the sword, then having a lot of dexterity really benefits the sword, but having a small amount of dexterity, it doesn't really do anything. This is going to go a bit smaller as you go further to the left. So if I were to enter in 0 dexterity right here, or make that a 0, this value would actually still end up being 20 because of how that math works out. But because the exponent, that's basically going to return like a 1. Yeah, that's going to return a 1 and then add 19 to it, so it's going to be 20. So even if we go all the way down, it's still always going to be like basically 20. So that's going to be really reliable on that start end. But you can see that like it requires some serious gains in dexterity. It's not nothing, but you have to get up to 140 to even double the damage you're getting off of dexterity. But at that point, it really begins taking off. And 40 to 46, 52 to 60, 71, 84, and then 100. So you get gains very, very, very quickly. And if you were to get up to, say, 300 dexterity, you would be getting ludicrous damage off of this, right? Like, that just jumps everything up so high because the 300 dexterity scales extremely quickly on that latter end. So I'm not sure if that's something I'm going to want to compensate for, but it's something to be aware of when you're doing something with a function like this. That's just going to go very, very, very high. So this is actually a moment where it would be a good idea to close those out and go look at my characters and take a quick look in classes. So Knight, for example, going to have a lot of dexterity. What is your 99 dexterity? I can just enter 99 in here. 150. So that's pretty reasonable. A lot of these characters do not have more dexterity than that. Okay, Special Forces has a lot of dexterity. What is your dexterity at 99? 235. So let's see what 235 would be in our function. So if we entered in 235, we'd get 193 damage out of it, which is pretty substantial. You're getting a lot of gains on the upper end of dexterity. Is this... Yeah, okay, this isn't quite as high, 196. Ninja seems to be ludicrously high. 264. So 264 is 349 damage. Okay, here's another really important question. The ninja cannot wield a sword. You'll notice right here, its weapons are dagger, flintlock, claws, chain, slingshot, and katana. So because it can't wield a standard sword, that's not a concern. Like, it's really important to make sure you're not making something into an issue that isn't one. I don't think Special Forces, which also had the really high dex, can wield a sword. So if we look at the characters that can wield a sword, it's the Knight, which has perfectly reasonable values that it's probably going to be in. The Whammo, which is going to get most of its damage off of strength, not off of dex for a sword. A lot of these aren't going to be able to wield swords because they're casters. This one can, the War Mage can, but its dex at 99 is going to be like a reasonable 100. It's not going to get that much off of the dex scaling. So I think, yeah, there's the energy sword, but that's not a regular sword. The Druid also does not wield a sword. Special Forces can wield a lot of weapons, but mostly guns and like other random crap. The Ranger might be able to wield a sword. Yeah, so the Ranger can wield a sword. So the Ranger's probably the weapon, or the character with the highest raw dex stat that can wield a sword. So, because the Sage also is like straight 150. So all of that considered, this graph is probably safe because I don't think we're going to get characters above maybe 250, which is like 262 is a lot. Like, but it's especially like 200 is down to 100. So even a little bit, like 201, let's say 205, like that's not too bad. So if we are getting to like 210, yeah, I'm okay with that. 230, okay, maybe that's a bit much. So like maybe I don't want more than like maybe 220 dex on a character that can wield a sword. I don't think that's a big danger, but it's important to kind of be aware of what some of those value ranges can be. So if I'm wanting to take the inverse of this function, the inverse of it is going to be a little bit different because it's going to need to be like log base 9 of 100 of, what is it? Minus 19. Okay, I'm going to take a piece of paper. I'll be right back. Okay. If I've done my math correctly, I believe it is 100 log base 9 of x minus 19 is the inverse. So let's just give that a try and see what we get. So this needs to become 100 times the log of I have a bunch of pieces of paper on this clipboard, so it's kind of fighting me. This minus 19, comma, what was that base again? 9? Okay, so that's obviously not working. What do we get when we get up to here? Oh. We get some values. Okay, so it's a starting point, right? It's a starting point. So now I need to begin tweaking this and see what I get. Because I may have done some of that conversion wrong. But like I said, it's a starting point. So I'm going to pull out my invisible graphing calculator. And let's see, 100 times... Let's just see what our graph looks like to start. So... I want the log base 9 of x minus 19. It seems very strange. Woo! Okay, that's not at all... That is not at all what I want. It's fine. Either I did something incorrect in my conversion process, which is definitely possible, or something else went wrong somewhere. So let's not do that and just see what we get if we do 100 times... Excuse me. Okay, let's think about this critically. So the log of x is going to give me... Or the log of 9 is going to give me what power I need to take a 9 to get that value. So if I just enter in that, then 20 is going to be... 9 to 20 is... Ooh, that's going to be a 1 point something, I think. It's going to be a very low value. Okay, so it's drawing the first curve, and then it is... Okay, it's complete bananas for the second curve. So 20 is 136, so that's clearly way too big. Yeah, so I'm going to want this... Minus 19 is kind of important. And that's 9 to get to 1? Okay, I'm going to work out the math, and then I will come back to you, because this is otherwise going to be a lot of me just talking about numbers, and it's going to be very boring. Okay, I'm going to jump in back real quick to say I think I found the inverse correctly, but I don't want the inverse, because the inverse is mirrored along y equals x. It's mirrored along that line. So basically, it's mirrored along the line kind of going from here to, like, here. And so it is... I think I did find the proper inverse, but I don't want the inverse. I want something different. So I'm going to have to spend some time playing around with some logarithms here to kind of figure out what's going to get me sort of the curve that I want, which is going to kind of look more like this, but it's going to take a moment. So I will be fiddling. It's not going to take long for you because I'm going to cut. Okay, well, I got a formula. It's not perfect, but it's close enough that I'm happy to work with it. So... let's give me a moment as I enter this monster in. So, the log of the value, that's this guy, over 10 minus 1, comma 2, times 20 plus 20. Okay, and I need to set this whole thing to be rounded. So this is my logarithm. And you'll notice it's not exact, but it is very close to where I wanted it. At 110, I want it to be about 90-ish. And it is close. It's a little bit low. It's a little bit high on the 200 end. But I'm going to call this approximately where I wanted it. And that's close enough. So let's go ahead and enter this formula into my chart. So instead of P26, it should be this. Okay. Let's drag that down and give ourselves... Now you can see that this has adopted a curve to it. I don't know why its scaling is not even, but here we are. I could probably tweak that if I wanted to. Edit chart. Let's see. Can I tweak? Whatever. It doesn't really matter. Okay. So, yes, I wanted to give this its bottom back because that makes me feel better. Okay, so this is going to give us, you can see there's a very considerable difference in how this curve grows. So it slows way down as we get to these larger values. So strength matters a lot at the beginning. If you have 20 strength, it gives you 20. If you have 30 strength, it gives you 40 damage. So it's actually increased by, you know, more than sort of the raw value, as it were. 40 gives you 52, but 50 is only giving you 60. Right? So it's even starting to drop off right here, where this gives you, you know, a good bit more. This is only giving you a little bit more. And then 60 is only giving you 66. So, like I said, this begins to slow down considerably to where... And maybe I would like to push the curve a little bit more that way. So that way it was a little bit softer, but... Anyway, the basic point is, if I enter in like 300 here, this is only giving you 117, versus 300 dex gives you a ludicrous amount. And this is the difference between a logarithm and an exponential. As a logarithm starts off growing quickly and then slows down. Now, normally it's in that sort of 0 to 1, or it's not actually 0 to 1. It's in those ranges underneath 1. Logarithms don't go to 0. That doesn't make any sense. So. Because you can't take anything to a power to get it to the value of 0. You can just get it incrementally smaller. So anyway, that's how that works. But what this means is that I can then now have some values to work with my sword. So if I come over here and I say, okay, I want my sword's upper bound to equal... Oh, this is going to take a moment. Okay, I need to... First, let's just set this equal to 80 for the moment. Let's make our combined value here, and then I can copy it. So, if I come in here, and I grab this formula, and I do a notepad, and plop it in, and then I come over here to this formula, and I grab this guy, and I go into our lovely notepad and I add it. Okay, so these are our two formulas that I'm going to make use of. Thank you, notepad. You have been most helpful. And then I go into my sword here, and I set it like this. Whoops, I don't need two equals. This first floor is dexterity, so rather than have that, I'm going to enter in dex. And then the second value here is strength, so... we're going to enter in strength there. So now we have an initial sword value of 142, which is, like I mentioned, considerably more. But keep in mind, this is taking our values. Oh, no, these are taking our 150s. Excuse me. I need to tweak that because this should be M, not N. M and M. Okay. That's more reasonable. So if I want to keep the initial value that I had, I just add 40 on, and now we're good. So now this can be my sword formula, my formula for sword damage. So if I get my character up to, 150 strength and, say, 90 dexterity, now my sword will be doing that 122 damage to... Get out of here, notes. Notes are useful, but they're also kind of annoying. To 162 damage. Which gives me some idea of kind of what the ranges are. If you have 200 in both, then you'll notice the sword is 184 to 242 damage. So that scales to a nice spot. 242 damage on the upper end seems pretty reasonable. And you can see how that compares to something like where the whip is set off of dexterity. The whip is not as nice of values in terms of where I'd want them to be. I think just because this is like 20 and then 40 onto your dex. But you can see sort of the way the sword is working now with these values is this is giving us a very reasonable range. It's fairly comparable to sort of this idea of, oh, dexterity plus an amount. But, it's dexterity matters a lot. If we have only 20 dex, then our strength at 200 is only doing a bit. If we have, 50 dex, that's not really accomplishing much for us. But if we have 100 dex, well, that's starting to do some. And once we get up to like 200 dex, that does quite a lot. So this is going to give me some ideas for how some of these values are going to work, how some of them are going to scale. I like claws where they're at. Keep in mind they strike twice, so it's actually probably a little strong as it is, so I'm probably going to need to nerf them a little bit. But I like this spot for the sword, where the sword is curving very nicely with these to where, and again, we kind of calculated them out here. We're getting these graphs for dexterity's influence and strength's influence. So, boy, that was a lot of math. At least on my end. Okay, so I like this spot for sword. Now, I think I'm probably going to do something a little bit simpler for dagger. So I'm just going to rename this to dagger because we don't really care about this stuff. I'll plop this down here and just call this sword formula. Bold, center, and let's go ahead and drop this guy in one of these guys. Okay, so that gives us our sword formula. Now we're going to want to figure out what dagger is going to do. I want dagger to generally be less overall influence. Now, keep in mind, if our strength is a little bit lower, if our strength is like 16 and we have like 11 dexterity maybe, which is reasonable starting values, you can see that the sword goes down to 49 to 65, which is not bad, but not as good as obviously the raw. Now, our dexterity doesn't really matter here. Dexterity below 20 doesn't do anything to the damage especially, but our strength, if we go up a bit on strength, matters a lot. So you can see that dexterity has a very, very, very small influence early on, which I think is really interesting. The idea that I'm trying to mimic here is that being able to hit harder matters a lot up to a certain point, but once you get past a certain point, you're not really getting much more out of being able to hit harder, whereas being able to hit a little bit more precisely, which is what dexterity kind of represents to me mentally, means that you're going to be able to like some dexterity early on and having some good aiming doesn't really get you that much just because you're not getting that much good aiming out of lower dexterity. But once you're really getting more precision with your dexterity, it scales up the damage considerably because you're able to land blows in good spots. So it's kind of having better weapon control matters more the more of it you have, as it were. So basically kind of like the idea of your raw brute strength helps up to a certain point, at which point you really need to be able to hit more precisely to be getting more damage. And that's kind of the idea of what I'm trying to capture with some of these numbers. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to translate that over into this guy, and that's going to be a bit of a pain. So if I come here and I look at this giant pile of math, I'm just going to copy it and go over into, where is weapons? Sword. This is what we had initially. So I'm going to need to plop this math in, and then I'm going to need to convert this into how it's going to need to work for this system. So this is going to be like, what is this one? This is dexterity, so this is going to be A.dex. And then this is A.strength. Okay, plus 40 does what I want. Now, one of the things I'm going to need to figure out, because this is going to be math.round, and then math.floor. This is going to be math.pow, 9, comma, let's see, this chunk. Yes. Yeah, like that. So math.pow plus 19 floored, and math.round. Now, the big thing that I'm going to need to figure out here is because this is ugly, hideous math. The logarithmic function that I have access to, I assume I have one, but I need to be able to make use of that. So, because I am using a log here, and I need to be able to use a general log. So I'm going to need to identify what my available log function is. So math.log. Native code. Cool. So if I enter in 2, 4, what do you get me? Okay. And if I enter in 4, 2, what do you get me? That doesn't make sense either way. What the heck is this function? So one of these should have returned me 2. Because 2 to the 2 gets me 4. And neither of them did, so I'm not sure what this function does. Log 1p? I don't know what that means. Is this log base 2? If I give this 4, that gets me 2. Okay. And I believe I'm using a base 2 log, so I should be able to use log 2 to be able to get what I want. So if I enter in 16, that gives me 4. Okay. So log 2. What the heck is math.log then? Because it's not doing either of these. Yes, I know. Not doing either of the things that I would expect. And I do have math.pow. Yeah. So 2 to the 2 is 4. 2 to the 4 is 16. Cool. Well, aside from me being extraordinarily confused on... You can get out of here. What their functions are, log 2 should work. So now I just need to convert this into that format. So I should just be able to go math.log2. Okay, and this, theoretically, if I've done things correctly, should get me my damage. And then this is going to be math.round this mess times 0.75. Now I need to take this mess and put it here. And take this mess and put it here. Okay. So if I hit apply, okay, and save, let's go test to make sure our gigantic formula mess works okay. So I'm going to just hit new game. I believe you start with a sword. So if I go to equip you, yeah, steel sword, he gets 77 to 103 damage, and he has 32 strength and 27 dex. So let's just enter in 32 and 27 into our thing and see if that's what we expect. So, yeah, okay, that's fine. So 32 and what was it, 17? Doesn't really have any, like that amount of dexterity doesn't really have any influence on anything. So don't you just love my my desktop? Okay, so 27 dexterity. Also doesn't do anything. Okay, so the 77 to 103 damage is our expected value range for 32 strength and 27 dex, or 17 dex. Obviously that's too low of a value to do anything appreciable, because it doesn't really increase until you get to 40 dexterity. Yay. But that means that our math is correct, it looks like, and is functioning properly. If this was not functioning properly, I'd get some sort of error, and I'm not getting any sort of error, so that means these values are being computed as expected, and because I copied and pasted, it should work fine in the other spots. Now, something that I can do is I can grab this character and this character And this character, yes, that's fine. And if I go to their equip, you can see this has the steel axe, the short bow, and the mana blade. If I take all of these weapons off, and take off this sword, and I look at this steel sword. Okay, this is giving me a bunch of stuff there. But as soon as I equip it, it's giving me the values. So that means I need to figure stuff out to kind of fix that. Now, she only has 22 strength, so seeing those slightly lower values, closer to that 60, 80, makes sense. Weapon. Okay, again, I'm going to need to make sure I fix that. Now, this character has substantially more dexterity, so we're going to get a little bit of a bump potentially from that, but no, we're not really going to see any bump from that. So 30 dexterity is not enough to kind of bump it. So this is all strength. 71 to 95. Cool. This also is just giving me some raw stuff to expect. So with a steel sword here, this character is getting the standard 60 to 80 because they have 20 strength. So that's giving me some stuff to work with. Now, again, like I said, I'm seeing that I'm not properly getting values when I'm in the sort of looking phase. Like, this is giving me that stuff. So what I'm going to need to do is figure out how it's sending that help data, so I can try to fix that. So let's see. Where do I modify all of that stuff? Well, I'm going to need to figure that out. Where do we calculate that? Oh, that's not in here. That's in... Okay, I'm going to need to go grab a JavaScript file. I will be right back with that in here. Okay, it's going to be something in this file here. Update help. So window equip slot. And is it... Which one? Okay, so something that I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. Actually, no. I have a better idea. I can go to this JavaScript. If I go over to sources, JS, plugins, informative descriptions, and I go down here. This is the equip slot code. And if I put a breakpoint here, yeah, I'm breaking here. This is where I'm setting the description. Right? No, I think I'm just setting the breakpoint. Okay, so wait, it's not that one. What's going on here? Okay, what my guess is there's a different... Yeah, this then goes in here and grabs this information. So this modifies the description. So if there is a description, modify it. So what's happening is there's a different function being called. So I'm going to need to go to weapon equip slot. There's a window equip slot. Oh, yeah, it's probably this guy. So there's update help, which is what I have modified over here, right? Yeah, update help makes that call and then handles grabbing the item description and modifying it. So the question then is there some other way that is updating help that is short-circuiting the full call? So this calls update help, which presumably is this. Okay, so this is a proto thing that probably calls this, but okay. So Windows selectable update help. calls that. So what I'm going to want to do, this is how we do investigations around here. Yep, this. Window.clear. Okay, so all that does is it clears the window. That doesn't inform anything particularly. So then this would set the item, but I don't have it do that. So where else would it modify things? This is equip slot. Okay, so this is equip slot, but what I actually need is... Oh, okay, I see what's going on. So what's happening is the equip slot is updating the help with the help for the equip slot, but what I need is I need to update the help for the equipment window. So these are separate windows. So now you're getting to watch me debug code. That's exciting, isn't it? So this status window... Yeah, okay. Where is the item window? Create item window. Okay. This is window equip item? Is that correct? It looks like... Because this one is making... equipment slot. This is making equip item. So I'm going to need to do the same thing to this thing's help as I did to the other thing's help. So now I need to come over to here. So this is RPG scenes and then RPG window. Scenes basically manage like things like collections of windows and stuff like that. I'm not an expert on it. I just know enough to kind of find my way around. Whereas... Okay, so it's this guy right here. Whereas windows are just like individual window elements. So if you look at things where I've kind of like made my own, which I don't have any open right now and I don't feel like digging for them. But if you look at some of the stuff where I've kind of made my own, you have to set up scenes and then have them set up windows and kind of control them. It's a whole system. I vastly prefer something like Unity, but this is all written in JavaScript because of course it is. Okay, so right here, this update help is the function I'm going to need to be modifying. So let's go ahead and grab this and come over here. It's good that I found this particular issue. I also don't like doing this. I like to have my curly braces on the same line because I find it easier to figure out what's going on. Okay, so if this actor and this status window... oh, I see. They make a change to the actor... Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this from actor to A. Right here. And then it sets the temporary actor to A. Oh, okay. This status window... Okay, so this is going to be similar to what this is doing. But it's... Oh, okay. I'm going to need to figure out... Okay, I'm probably not needing to modify this. I'm probably going to need to modify set temp actor from status window. Which means that what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to find this function over here. Set temp actor equals function. Okay. So that's probably equip status. Okay, so this is the only instance of this. So this is probably the function that I would need to do. Oh, okay, I see. Draw item. Wait, am I looking at the... Oh, I'm probably looking at the wrong thing. So, wait, now I'm confused. The status window... Okay, I need to figure out what window the status window is, because equip status might be... I have a good way of figuring this out really quickly, actually, I think. If I go to the bottom here, this is... Yeah, equip status is the one that I changed to do the line. So that's the thing to the side. I need the help. So this just calls update help on the window list. Window item list update help. Okay. So I might want to override this part of the call, and I probably don't care too much about this. And I'm more interested in this part right here. So let's look at item list update help. Specifically, I need this bit. So this is going to be back in the window. Equal function. Okay, so this sets item when set help item help window item, which is probably no. Is it not in here? Okay, so this is going to be whatever this is from. Because I need to figure out what this is doing, is the thing. So if I find this... Okay, what does item lists inherit from? The item list is inheriting from Windows selectable. So it is Windows selectable set help window item. So this if help window, this help window dot set item. So that sets the item in the help window. Which, okay, is basically this line of text. So does this have... I can just change that to set text, I think. So what am I doing over... Get out of here. What am I doing over here? This is going into the help window and set text. So I basically am wanting to take this... instead of that. So this right here... Okay, because that's calling those things. Okay, so if I do this, and I don't think I need this anymore. Theoretically, if this also has... Yeah, okay, this also has this actor. Okay, let's see if that fixes the bug. Sure, this will work just as well. So if I go to equip and I go here and I take that off. Okay, I'm not going to be able to check with that weapon because that weapon doesn't have the crazy math yet. Mana Blade I can check. Okay, now that just says 50 to 55 slashing damage, where before it was giving me errors. Okay, so that is working. I have fixed my code. I don't even know how long this episode is yet, but I've been recording for almost 2 hours. Okay, so that fixes the bug with my code. That's the important thing. I'm going to need to modify how the Mana Blade calculates its values because it's going to be way too good. Because of all that stuff. So, all right. Yeah, max MP is 40, and this is plus 10, plus 15. Right. Okay. Glad to have that bug fixed. And now the sword should work in a way that's a lot cleaner. So if I go ahead and say go new game, this guy has a sword. Hooray for ease of testing. You can use a sword. You can use a sword because that's the stage, and you can use a sword. Now, yes, I filled up my party. If I go here and I clear his stuff, and then I go equip sword. 75 to 100 damage. He lost a little bit of strength when I changed some of his equipment, so that would be why. Sword, 71 to 95. sword 60 to 80. And I imagine this will also be 60 to 80. Cool. So that is fixed and working properly. Good. Good. Presumably it will work properly in combat too, I hope. All right. So now we've figured out how we're working our sword. Let me return these back to sort of the standard 20 to 20. So you've gotten the general idea for the process. I don't necessarily want to talk through the math for all of them because that sounds exhausting, and we've spent a lot of time on the math for just the sword. I don't think any of the other weapons are going to be quite this complicated, at least just because I'm generally not wanting to try to do this sort of fancy curve thing. I in particular wanted the sword to kind of do some interesting stuff in that way. Kind of fun to figure out. So if I'm looking at something like sword, though, this gives me rough ideas of sort of where I want sort of the max to be. So in other words, I kind of want, let's just do a quick average of this and this range, 214.5. So let's say I want the average average to be 215 damage at sort of like good stats. So average damage at good stats. What that means is I'm going to want the dagger to deal roughly half of that with its slashes. This is not necessarily going to be an exact thing, but I want to get things kind of in a little bit of a ballpark. So the dagger will probably aim to be a little bit under, like maybe I want it to deal approximately 100 damage at max. So that way it's a little bit under what the sword deals on average, but it will be able to a little bit under, but we'll be able to I need to finish my thought here. Hit criticals a little bit more often, so it's going to get more damage out of that. Is kind of the idea. I think I might tweak some of the additional properties on stuff, but I'm not sure that I'm going to. For example, I like the fact that the slingshot just happens to deal striking type damage and be very, very accurate, and to where it's going to get high damage rolls, so the damage value is a little bit deceiving here, for example. But I'm thinking like this probably is going to be a round of 0.6 times C9. So that's 21. That's a little bit higher, but I'm kind of okay with that. And so what I'm going to want here is I'm going to want something where it's a lot more linear. So say 20 dexterity is probably going to be around, let's say I want that around 15. Then what I'm going to want is I'm going to want, let's see. So let's do our calibration points again. So 20 dex, 110, and 200. So those are our calibration points. So this is going to be strength and dexterity. So let's say I want this to be 15, and I want this. So this is going to be 15 plus 20. Is that how this is going to work? No, not plus 20. Like let's say I want this to then be like 3. So then this is going to equal this plus this. That's 18. So plus what is that to get to what I want? Like 17? 35? So I kind of like it being at 35. I don't know that these values are perfectly balanced, to be clear. And I'm probably going to tweak some of them. For example, the energy sword is probably going to come down in overall values. Or it's going to be tweaked in how it works. Because the energy sword is very wonky in its behavior. And so a number of these are probably going to be tweaked a bit. I want to try to make sure that they're going to be hitting those sort of like standard ranges. It's just that the dagger and the sword were, excuse me, in particular, a little bit more balanced around each other initially. So that means, in particular, the sword was kind of balanced around the dagger because the dagger was the first weapon I made. So I like having this try to hit 35 here. So if I'm doing that, then that means this is 75% of the dexterity, and this is like 5%, roughly. So like 0.05 times this. Okay, that's 1. No, this. So if I want that to be 3, so then this becomes 15. And probably need to round this just to be safe. And then this is going to equal round this times 0.75. So then if I just copy this down, obviously those are just going to be 17s. And I copy these down. Okay, so this is a little bit much. This is going to obviously be 30 at 200 strength and 150 at 200 dex for 197. I want to tone that down a little bit because 197 is a little bit too high. I know that I want my target value at 200 to be approximately 100. So what I'm going to do here is I'm okay-ish with that, but I might want to decrease the effectiveness of strength. Let's change it to just 10% of strength. So that drops the values a little bit, but it's pretty inconsequential, right? I don't want strength to be a big part of this. But what I might want to do is decrease this a little bit as well. So like, let's say I make this 0.6 and drag this down. Okay, that's still getting too high of a value for what I want. And this is kind of getting too high of a value for what I want there as well. So if I want this to be a curve that kind of slowly goes down, I can make this, say, the... well, let's just... What happens if I just make it the square root of the value? And I round it. So that's basically going to mean strength is absolutely nothing. Doesn't seem right. Square root of 26. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so that has a technical problem in that this should not be the square root of 26. This should be the square root of this value. Okay, so that's 4 and then 14. So that seems pretty reasonable. Obviously, so square roots, you can see the curve over here. This is the... or I haven't modified these curves, excuse me. So if I have strength just be the square root of this value, and then I copy those down. Oh, this is... Yeah, okay, so what you're going to see right here is this is very bumpy rather than being a smooth square root curve. Again, effects of rounding. That's just how it goes. So I want this then to be roughly 86. So that's a pretty small amount. So what if I take this and do a very similar thing where I go square root of that, but instead of just leaving it there, let's say I multiply it by 4. Let's see what that gives us. Okay, so that gives me 57. So that's clearly a little bit smaller than I want. Obviously 17 is a bit too big of an additive if I'm working with that value. So I want that to be 35 still. So, let's see. What could I do to bump that up a little bit? I could multiply it by a bigger value. I could. What if I multiply it by this value? Okay, so I need to come in here and I need to actually modify things so it'll take it. So what if I multiply it by the dexterity of, let's see, the dexterity over 5, say. Let's see what happens. Just, curious. Okay, that gets way too big. Yeah, that makes sense, though. It's sometimes fun to experiment around a little bit. So I can, instead of taking the square root of that, I could take the power of... I don't know why I'm using pow. So I can take, say, this value to... say the 1.5. Okay, 1.5 would be too much. 0.75? 9. It's a little low. 1.2? 1.1. Sure, 1.1. Let's just see what that even does. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. A bit too much. 0.9. That seems reasonable. Okay, that's still a little too big. So 8 maybe? I don't know why it's modifying this thing. This thing shouldn't be... Oh, I might have dragged it down low enough. Okay, so 8's a little too low. So let's just... Like, this is the trial and error process, right? You just kind of do things. Okay, 90 is is about where I want it. Now, technically, I'd want to bump this up to 18. Now, this is a little too much damage, so maybe I want to drop it down to like 0.83. And we're just going to keep playing with... Okay. Okay, that's just about right. I'm okay with this value because a lot of times having that much strength... now, yeah, I don't know. Kind of, because this should be... Yeah, this is technically 1 higher. Or 2 higher. Okay. D6. No, that needs to be a little bit lower than that. Yeah, okay, that's pretty reasonable. So, plus 20... Okay, I'm okay with that value. That value seems pretty good. You have some problems, chart. Where are you? Your data range is R6. No, you don't. You're just using 224. Yeah, okay, that's fine. And your x-axis needs to be R6 to R24. Yeah, because 24 is sort of the bottom of that. Okay. I don't know what was up with that. Okay, so if I come in here and I take basically the dexterity value, this... I just want to get a feeling for sort of how it looks. And instead of this, I'm using this. And just copy and paste that. Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. That curve is... You can see it kind of goes up, and it's not perfectly linear. It kind of just slows down over time, because that's how a square root works. Square roots... Well, so this is not a square root. This is a... I don't even know what root you want to call that. 0.81 is a type of root. It's an... Because a square root is 1 over 2. So this is taking something to the 100th root and the 81st power is mathematically equivalent of what this is doing. So that's ugly, and I don't want to think about it, but that's kind of what we're doing here. This is rounded. Good. So what I can then do, or what I should be able to do, I think, is if I just come over here to... I might need to pull up Notepad again. A lot of massaging values until I get stuff that I'm happy with. So what I have is this square root. Whoops, that is the wrong... Oh, I see what's happened. Notepad got over on the wrong spot and confused me. It's more on my second monitor than it is on the first monitor, and therefore everything went wonky. So this is round square root. I don't know, what is strength? Strength is 12 plus dexterity is M13 to the 0.81 plus 20. That is, I believe, the formula. Let's go ahead and drag that guy over there. That I want for dagger max. So if I plop that guy in, oh yeah, because I'm not rounding individually, it's giving me slightly different values. So let's put 19 in there. All good. Okay, now if I have 200 dex, my my dagger is dealing 97 damage, and yeah, having 200 strength bumps the damage up, but doesn't really do very much, because the strength portion that you get from the dagger is just fairly low, which I'm okay with. That's kind of how I want it to go. This is primarily a dexterity weapon. So now I have a formula for my dagger. Now I need to translate this formula into this program over here. Whew, this is a lot of math, everyone. A lot of math. Okay, so this right here is a dot dex, and this needs to be math.pow. That comma 0.81. And then this is probably math.square root, a dot strength, and then math.round. Okay, if I've done this correctly, this will work. And this is math.round this times 0.6. Excellent. So now I should be able to go up here and plop that in there and take this and plop it in here. Good. All right. Well, I hope you all have enjoyed math time. I certainly have mathed quite a bit. So now I have some standard damage for my daggers. Here's an interesting question. If I go... Can I? You know what? Let's insert one left. Let's make an AVG. Oh, good. You know exactly how I want you to look. Most excellent. Let's just move this over here. Let's make this a touch wider because I feel like it should be. Okay. So let's just set you to be the average of this range. Call that good. And just drag this down. Okay, so that's going to give me a lot of averages. Do I want that to be... Let's just round the average as well. It'll make it a little bit cleaner to process. So like I can tell that the axe is an average of 105, which is kind of high, but that means I can also plug in my 200, 200. I'm just going to shrink one of these guys to pull that over a little bit. And that gives me the dagger average of 85, which is notably, you know, that doubled is less than the 215 of the sword, but it also is going to crit a little bit more often and a bit more powerfully. Yeah. Now I just have a bunch more weapons that I'm going to need to process. If I'm being blunt, I don't necessarily want to do that all right this moment, because that sounds like a very long episode of a lot of math. So what I might do is just try to work through some more of this math, sort of behind the scenes until I'm kind of satisfied with everything. It has some serious crit on the pipe right now. So I think the big things that I'm going to want to accomplish in this process is identify what is each weapon about, and then also identify what each weapon is about, and then what sets each weapon apart, and that sort of thing. A lot of these more standard physical weapons are going to get stuff that's kind of in the similar vein to like what the dagger and sword is. Like I think I might make the axe basically just take the average of your strength and dexterity, to where it's kind of like, yeah, it kind of wants me to have both. And like the bow will probably be pretty evenly split as well. Let's be honest here. A bow, to get a lot of power out of it, you do need a lot of strength. You need a very high poundage bow to be able to get a lot of oomph. So this might be something that kind of scales a little bit more with strength, like how the sword scales with dex, where a low amount of strength doesn't give that much, but as your strength gets up higher, it starts counting for more. But I should also keep in mind who's going to be wielding it. If I go over to my classes, can the knight wield the bow? No. Can the whammo? Let's just kind of scroll down here and see who can wield the bow, because that's going to inform a little bit about some of that stuff. And okay, what I'm seeing, like, yeah, the druid can wield the bow, not very well. So that's, yeah, not much strength or dex here. I imagine the length of the recording is starting to make my system slower, I guess. So, like, keep in mind, the druid can wield the bow, but not spectacularly. Special forces does not. Ranger probably does, yeah, wield the bow. So the ranger's going to be able to use it fairly well. The ninja is... Nope. Berserker probably doesn't either. Sage can. So, really, the bow, I might want to kind of tweak a little bit so that way the druid can use it okay. So anyway, it's just going to be a long process, and I guess I got it started this time, but I'm certainly not going to finish it. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just about wrap up here. The other thing that I am going to note is that I've got a bunch of different types of armors as well that I'm going to want to make sure that I'm doing a similar thing to, where it's like, okay, what differentiates, like what makes a hat versus like a helmet, versus like a steel helmet, or an apprentice's hat, or all of these sorts of things. How am I going to be able to make more of these types of, or these pieces of gear that kind of do things? How am I going to kind of balance some of this stuff out? So for example, you can see that the foot soldier's helm increases your max HP. what I'm probably going to do is, for all of these sorts of things, because our defensive stat is just HP, like if I go to Steel Gauntlets, for example, they give you more HP and slightly more crit rate. Steel Plate Mail gives you a bunch more HP. I'm probably going to have some set flat value, like this 150 right here, that it adds, but it's probably also going to need to get a parameter HP, maximum HP, like times 110 or something like that. I'm not sure what values I want for those yet, but that's the direction that I'm planning on going with some of these and kind of figuring out, okay, what are rings about? So if I go back to types, you can see that I have a bunch of armor types. A bunch of these are just like different like chest armors and stuff, but you can see that I have the head slot, the body, the hands, the feet, and then different types of accessories as well as offhand. I'm going to need to figure out what all of those are about as well, and how they kind of differentiate from each other. So that way I can focus on things that are horizontal moves and equipment rather than vertical moves. So the difference being like horizontal are like, these are roughly equivalent. Like the standard sword, for example, steel sword, is probably going to be the worst one just because it doesn't have as many like bonuses, but it's probably going to be fairly comparable in damage to any other sword. That's kind of my intention, my plan with it. So I'm going to want to make sure I'm going through all of the weapons, kind of doing that with them, is like, okay, well, what are you about and how do you differentiate yourself from all of the other ones? That way you can be like, well, I want this on this character and this on this character because of these things. And all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of the direction that I want to go in. And there's just going to be a lot of figuring stuff out. And you've kind of seen some of the process for some of that math. But let's actually take a moment to discuss a little bit about what's going to separate things a bit here. So dagger and sword are pretty straightforward. Get the stupid notes out of here. I think I'm going to want crossbow, flintlock, shotgun, and rifle to all basically be like scale with stuff, with level rather than with stats specifically. But let's look at some of the other things. So gloves right now, its sort of thing is, this should be M, not. Should be M. No, it should be N. Whoops. Okay, all these things got modified when I added a new D. But anyway, these all scale, are the scales with your strength, and this scales with your dex. So there's some of these things where some of that stuff can make sense, where it's like, okay, the critical multiplier is something that kind of scales. But something like the scimitar, what I think the scimitar is going to set itself apart by is it always deals elemental damage and has a chance to inflict the condition of that element. So there's really not a whole lot of different scimitars that realistically can be made in terms of those sort of properties. But it also means I automatically get, 10 scimitars? So I have the metal scimitar, the ice scimitar, etc. And which one you want to wield and all that sort of stuff is going to vary. Scythes gain you HP when they crit rather than doing more damage, which is an interesting different property. Tomes allow you some magic reflection, which is a difference. It's a two-handed weapon and it gives you some magic reflection. So in general, being two-handed is a downside, so it needs to have more upside. Pipes. Yeah, pipes are interesting. I try to differentiate each of them, and I'm going to want to make sure I keep differentiations. So like magic missile right here, the thing that differentiates it from a staff. So staff is two-handed, and will probably overall, on average, deal more damage than what magic missile should be dealing as a one-handed thing. But magic missile has a chance to inflict the status ailment, similar to kind of how scimitar does. But scimitar is a little bit more variant on that. I think I might have scepter have a chance to inflict status ailment as well. So I think I'm going to give this like 10% chance to inflict blind. That's the light status ailment. So scepter and magic missile are going to kind of be counterparts to each other in some regards. And I'm going to want to make sure I'm speccing them in a way that kind of reflects that fact. So right now this is dealing 2/3 of the damage of this, based on sort of initial stats, but what this realistically should be is slightly different where, yeah, okay, so maybe it should just be like, I don't know. I'm going to have to figure out a lot of this math, and rather than talk through it here, I just want to give you a general idea of like the philosophy that I want to approach it with, where the more, or each weapon type has something about it that makes it a little bit different in how it functions than the other ones, and that can have a little bit more nuance. And I'm going to really need to make sure I'm thinking about some of that, like, excuse me, what makes a chainsaw good? Is it just high raw damage? Well, maybe that's part of it, but maybe it also scales off of level because it's not realistically based on skill per se, so much as it is on just its own raw power. And that's the same for a lot of these other weapons where, like, technically, yes, there's a skill component involved, but that component is perhaps, what's the phrase that I want to use for this? That component of skill that's involved in wielding these weapons is represented in other ways. So, for example, increased crit rate for the chainsaw. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking, kind of where I'm leaning. And I just kind of want to represent some of the ideas that I have here and perhaps nuance things up a bit, create ways to differentiate stuff, and then do this process again with armor. So, yeah, that'll be fun. But what my ultimate plan then is get these baselines in, get kind of the standard conception of the weapon in, and then I can begin figuring out, okay, what's the philosophy that I'm going to use for making different versions of weapons and weapons that work differently. And one of the things that I'm going to want to make sure that I do is approach some of these weapons intentionally to make them a little bit more different. Like right now, the club and the pipe are way too similar. The big difference between the club and the pipe is that the pipe has better crit. That's really what it's about. And I want to do more to kind of separate some of these. So expect me to kind of go through that process, and like maybe the chainsaw I will have scale with level and also your current TP. So that way the idea is as you're battling, you rev it up more and it becomes more powerful. That could be an interesting way to approach it. And how I approach the katana will probably be a little bit different as well. So feel free to leave any questions about what I'm doing. Again, I know this has been a long one and a lot of math and a lot of me trying to figure out what I'm doing. And I just wanted to make sure that I'm kind of expressing the philosophy that I'm going to be approaching, tackling the spreadsheet with. And then, like I said, what I'm ultimately going to do is over here in RPG Maker, when I'm like, okay, I want a sword, I'm going to just take steel sword. I'm going to say, copy and paste it, and then say, okay, I want a fire sword. Take the sword, the steel sword, and I'm not going to keep this around, but go fire, and then I can come up here and I can say, okay, this is going to deal fire damage. Maybe it's going to be worth a bit more. And then up here, you can change the element to fire, and then say, okay, this gives you maybe 20 bonus fire. But it's not going to scale with fire, right? That's kind of how I want to approach it. But where a lot of these properties are going to be consistent across swords, so that way you're looking for what properties do you want. I might change the animation in this case to be like /fire or something. Or maybe it will give you a special skill or something. But this is kind of the idea of how I want to approach making new weapons, where it's like, okay, the amount of damage this deals is the same. The damage formula is the same, but there's a little other properties that are tweaked and modified, and it has other things that it might give you that might make this particular sword more appealing. And one of the big rules that I want to have is swords, for example, because they scale off of your strength and dex, I'm not going to increase your strength or dex. That's just something that I want to make sure I do, so that way, because that weapon artificially raises its damage values, and I don't want to do that. So that's how I'm kind of intending on approaching a lot of this stuff. And that's just kind of setting up the philosophy. So, like I said, if you have any questions about any of this stuff or want to kind of know more about how I'm approaching things, feel free to leave comments in the description. But I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. So, until next time, everyone, take care and goodbye.